Welcome to Next in Tech, an S&P Global Market Intelligence podcast where the world of emerging tech lives. I'm your host, Eric Hanselman, Chief Analyst for Industry and Company Data at S&P Global Market Intelligence. And today, we're going to be talking about HR tech and employee experience with my guest, analyst Ethan Ray, who leads our coverage in these areas. Ethan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Eric. Looking forward to joining.
It's great to have you on, and there is so much that is being transformed by AI. It does seem like it is being a cliche on some form or fashion, but as with so many things, if we think about the technology that we've been putting to work, there's tremendous evolution taking place in both HR fields, what's happening in employee experience, and how organizations are actually dealing with workforce management that sits behind this as we look at wrestling with all of the things that technology evolution has been throwing at us. But these are the kind of things that even pre-AI we've been dealing with, although maybe pumped up a little in the current environment. What's your research focusing on, and what are you seeing in terms of some of these transitions?
Absolutely. So my research is focusing on the HR tech market in general, but AI is certainly pushing its way to the forefront and shaping the segments of HR tech as we have previously known them into these sort of new cross-collaborative segments that are able to interact more easily prompted through Gen AI, or are augmented and able to be enacted by agentic AI, which is something that we're seeing a lot of new innovation on, and I'm excited to talk about. My research really focuses on a couple different segments within the HR tech space. We have human capital management, which is our sort of legacy approach to HR technology, where we're thinking about how we manage our workforce, move human capital around to really take advantage of the skills and the people that we have. We also have employee experience, so looking at improving the working life of employees, measuring sentiment, using those to predict turnover or other important outcomes. Then we also have people analytics, which is using data and any sort of analysis to run statistical models or predictions on our workforce using that data. We also have talent acquisition, which is, acquiring new employees, onboarding them, properly training them, and getting them up to speed. That's closely tied to learning and development, which is an area we focus on as well. So how are HR technologies being used to upskill new employees, promote internal mobility of existing employees within an organization. And then we have performance management, which is how do we really measure and actively manage the performance of employees. We often think about this within the dyad of managers and employees. And then what I'm really excited to talk about today is a new emerging area that kind of spawned from talent acquisition and human capital management, and that is workforce intelligence. And that is this new area often enabled by AI due to the just sheer amount of data that's being processed. But this is using internal and external indicators of skills, tasks, labor market availability of employees and jobs to really paint a holistic picture around not only an organization's workforce, but the broader workforce in general, thinking engineers in South Africa and the availability of that talent over the next 5 years if we're looking to expand there. So really getting to answer some really interesting questions in this new emerging segment, but also staying grounded in what we know in those other segments of HR tech.
Well, it seems like one of the long-standing challenges is that organizations around the planet have always faced, which is how do you actually get the best out of the talent that you have? How do you understand what you have? And it's interesting talking about the workforce intelligence angle. How do you understand the market and how that interrelates with what's potentially available? it seems like that's getting into some broader reach in terms of some of the expectations about how we're going to integrate with, not only within the organization, but in the outside world and the markets outside of it as well.
Absolutely. I mean, this gets into, skills matching, skills-based hiring, upskilling, looking at the employee experience of individuals with certain skills. And it's really coalesced, I think, around skills because of just the versatile nature of that categorization in a data set. Thinking back, looking at the field through an organizational psychology view, which is my background, so I can't help but navigate to that. We've always looked at employees through what we call KSAOs, knowledge, skills, ability, or other, just kind of a broader category. So it's interesting to see the field really coalesce around skills to use that for these questions you're talking about. How do we really predict what's happening over the next X amount of years in our workforce? And skills is really taken off because of the external data that we have, where we do have a fair amount of external skills data that if an organization uses a taxonomy to group and organize their skills internally, they're actually able to pair this up with an external database and do some one-to-one matching, trying to understand some trends there. So it's really interesting to see this coalesce around skills in the market.
Well, it seems like something where we're getting to a point at which we've got ever greater potential data insights that we can use to leverage that overall perspective. But to your point, we've within the organization, we've got to be able to align. It's always this data alignment problem, right? We've got to ensure that we have an understanding that aligns with what's actually with the other data sets that we're actually working with them. And sometimes that's one of the larger challenges for an organization is actually just simply making sense of both the capabilities they have and aligning them with models that are going to mesh well with external data that they can use to actually to align themselves with that view of the outside world.
Absolutely. And we're seeing a lot of interesting things here with competing skills taxonomies across these vendors, where it's not a perfect fit across how these vendors are categorizing skills. So it's a huge decision for an HR department to go with one vendor over another, oftentimes because of the skills taxonomy that they're offering. And one thing that's clear is a lot of these vendors are coming at it from not a one-size-fits-all, that they're willing to work with an organization to use whatever taxonomy they want to use, however they want to group their skills. But the downside of this, I think, is a lot of times HR departments become frozen because there's so many different ways to go about this that they're sort of looking for that one source of truth. And something that's very interesting that I just saw at the recent HR Tech conference I attended last week was a push for an open skills initiative, similar to open source code. Visier actually an open source initiative for skills. And I'll be interested to see how much this tracks and really carries weight in the market. But it's been the first push for sort of an open skills taxonomy that I've seen yet. And I think that's really exciting.
Well, it seems like this is, so often we see this when you're looking at characterizing data. There are many ways to characterize, especially something that can be as abstract as skills and capabilities. That there are lots of different people will have different ideas about how you do that characterization, and if you're trying to slice and dice, how you categorize is, that it seems like those are taxonomy discussions that could get really complex. And very significantly in terms of the workforce, what their skills portfolio looks like, and the way in which you'd look to subdivide, classify, what the structure of that taxonomy is actually going to look like. I take it the thought is from an open source perspective that you can come up with a relatively open structure and help align some of these different taxonomies that are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it gets really interesting too when you think about how are we predicting the next set of skills that's going to become, sourced after in the market. And something that was really interesting to me that got me thinking about the different applications of this and really where we can go, especially with, LLMs and AI being able to dig through a lot of data. A vendor I talked to last week was actually using patent filings as a leading indicator for future skills that are going to be sought after in the market. And so I think that gets into a little sci-fi, where how much weight does a future patent filing carry? But it's interesting to think about what sort of indicators we can use with large data analysis to try to make sense of where certain industries are heading.
Well, I mean, looking for leading indicators is always that holy grail, right? And it is because we look at patent filings for technology directionality in organizations. It's something that it's a data set that we've used quite a lot in terms of other perspectives. Interesting to see that put to work on the workforce side as well. I guess we'll have to see how that shakes out. What do you see as some of those other approaches that are starting to change some of the fundamentals there?
I think another approach that's starting to change the fundamentals is just a change in general operating models and a collapse, what we're seeing, of the HR, IT, and finance department within this broader workforce intelligence model. So not only are we looking at skills, but we're also looking at technology utilization of our employees. We're able to, in real time, there's a number of vendors that are able to track productivity metrics. That gets into another area I'm excited to talk about, is really the ethics and governance and transparency with all of this, because as this accelerates, it is, I think, going to become a balancing act with what we can measure versus what we should measure. But regardless of that, we're seeing this data being utilized not only in terms of vertical functions, as we've been used to, where HR uses people data, IT is using technology data, finance is using the financial outcomes data, but really putting this into one horizontal database across the organization to be able to make sense of what skills in a department are leading to outstanding financial performance and, being utilized with the latest technology, really getting into these sort of esoteric questions about the workforce, and really tying it back to ROI and IT utilization at the end of the day. So I think that's another thing that's impacting this workforce intelligence area, is just pooling data from any area in the organization and putting it to use to really derive the answers to these questions.
Well, I mean, talk about holy grails. Being able to identify things like, is this new technology? I mean, how long have we been asking these questions? We rolled out this cool new technology. Did it help?
Right.
And are people more productive because of it? What's it actually done? And it sounds like, well, especially, I guess this is something that I've certainly, it seems to be a longer term trend, which is that integration of HR teams across the organization. As technology becomes a bigger part of that equation, as you were pointing out, as the use of that technology becomes a bigger part of that equation, legal teams and HR teams have always been relatively tied together, but now you've got sort of the technology dependency that rolls into that. You've got the governance issues that start to roll on top of that. There are all these intersections that now start to mean that all of those questions around workforce management. I don't want to head towards saying it takes a village, but it seems like it takes a village.
And it certainly takes a village. And another interesting point of this is the number of point solutions that are currently deployed across HR departments, as well as these other adjoining functions that I've talked about. In one presentation at HR Tech last week, Someone referenced the number of HR tech solutions at work in any given business at a time currently, and the average is 16 different point solutions that are gathering and making sense of this data. And I think a huge trend that we're seeing is the appetite for organizations to have one single source of truth of their organization's data so that they can deploy these large-scale workforce intelligence solutions to make these pointed predictions. It's going to require sort of a collapse of those point solutions where we're starting to see organizations look to vendors to provide that single platform that they're able to run these analyses on and scale back on these point solutions. So it's almost like undoing the work you've done for a number of years with adding these point solutions into one single platform. And I think that's a messy and hard question to get right.
All right. Well, you've said the P word now, platforms. We see it in so many other technology disciplines. And again, we can sort of line this up to maybe this is sort of the pendulum swinging between sort of the best of breed applications back to platforms. But we see it in so many different areas in that organizations get tactical. And they head out and they'll use a specific app for whatever technology for the particular use case, and it does a great job. It's deep, it does the thing that they need it to do, and yet those kind of tools proliferate because you use one tool for this, use one tool for that, and then get to a point at which you realize that the overhead of managing all of this, the fact that you can't correlate the results from all these individual tools starts to become an issue. And it is one of the things we see in AI messaging all the time, which is all you have to do is take all your data and dump it into, some, large back end and AI will fix it. And then not really a situation I think we find ourselves in, but it does start to push that shift towards platform. And as you're pointing out, not an easy thing to start to unbolt all of what you have in place, because then invariably you've got to make some compromises in that shift. What do you see as some of the complexities in that journey?
Well, I think the complexities in that journey are really being prompted mainly because of AI, like you said, in that HR leaders are being pushed to reinvent their practices around AI, agentic tools, culture and leadership that have to do with this because, you have to get your house in order before you're able to really unleash the full power of this technology. So I think along with maybe HR budgets and, other adjoining factors, this push for, AI and unleashing all of your data is pushing towards this single platform. And for good reason, because some of the capabilities of these technology platforms we're seeing are really impressive, where, a year or 2 years ago, maybe there was a nascent idea to, hey, maybe we should get our data on these platforms. I'm hearing about AI. There's some really, great capabilities in terms of HR. And, 1 or 2 years later, now we're at the point where AI tools are no longer just chatbots or assistants. These are technologies that can make intelligent recommendations. They can anticipate future events and outcomes. And if you're able to have all of your organization's data, like I said, HR, IT, finance, under one single source of truth, then you're really able to take advantage of these things. And just some quick examples of where we're at with this technology. We're seeing in workforce scheduling, there are some amazing capabilities of AI in workforce scheduling where, in terms of even frontline workers, if you're looking to schedule restaurant workers for shifts, there's a lot of complexities in that where there are labor laws, there is a high turnover of talent in those industries, and a manager able to use AI to source and input employees into a workforce schedule, makes sense, is a huge capability for AI, and I think we're going to see it grow, especially in frontline industries. Another application that I recently saw was a manager coach, and this was just really impressive, where the AI is able to look back through any recorded interactions that an employee has through technology, whether that be Gong calls, Microsoft Outlook emails, Slack, Teams, and recommend, based on an organization's competencies or performance management system, able to recommend development opportunities for an employee. And it doesn't just stop there. The platform is then able to create a role-playing simulation for a manager to practice delivering feedback to an employee in a video call. And the AI will prompt whether that was, the right way to deliver that feedback, if that's exactly what was tracking with the development opportunity surfaced. So really creating these real-time role-playing, roll up your sleeves and really practice what is sourced as developmental feedback for your employees. And then one last one, and this is the area that we're seeing a lot of AI agents initially deployed, is in recruiting. And recruiting, I think, has a very linear progression to it, right? We want to create a job requisition, then we want to source and screen top applicants, schedule interviews, but the AI can even go as far as to synthesize recorded interview feedback from the interviewers, stack rank those candidates based off of that feedback, and even send out offer letters to those candidates. So those are just a couple of the kind of leading use cases that I saw come out of HR tech with, Gen AI and AI agents. That's really, really exciting. And once again, kind of going back to pooling from a number of different sources within the organization and just requiring that data fluency throughout, multiple connected streams within an organization.
Well, you got to have the data and the capabilities in order to actually make the decisions and in order to generate the outcomes from the AI perspective. It's interesting that, as we see in so many aspects, we've got both sides of the AI coin, especially in hiring. The ability to generate, from an applicant side to generate significant amounts of volume, and now from the hiring side, being able to actually make more sophisticated decisions about the hiring process, coordinating the actual hire interview. Those are things that, if you think about just dealing with scope and scale, a lot of significant potential. A lot of concerns, though, that get raised in some areas as well, though. You talked earlier on about some of the regulatory compliance concerns around that. Where do you see that playing out? What do you see as some of the areas that people should be aware of there?
I see this playing out as, trying to, from an HR function standpoint, trying to make an educated decision on what is the proper technology to deploy for my organization in terms of, let's say, an AI agent model, while the regulatory and governance shifts below your feet. I recently saw one stat where there have been 35 AI laws enacted over the last 5 years, up from one law in 2020. So there's 34 different AI laws have come to fruition over the last 5 years. And that has large implications for an organization that decides to go with one technology, and then all of a sudden, whether that's statewide or federally, there are data ethics concerns with what this agent or Gen AI is, the data it's pulling from. And I think that this creates this environment where, you're kind of playing defense when you implement one of these technologies, because you're not always sure what the next couple of years will look like in terms of ethics and regulation. So I think it's a interesting area to watch, and also one that's hard for HR decision makers to, really understand what is the correct decision to make.
Well, it's something that we see so often about AI in general, which is the ecosystem is evolving rapidly, the regulatory environment is evolving rapidly, and the decision that you make today is very easily going to be upended by shifts in both of those days, weeks, months ahead. But I guess a lot that we should be keeping an eye on. So I'll point our listeners to a lot of your research in the end. But this has been great, Ethan. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Eric. Had a great time. Appreciate you having a conversation.
And that is it for this episode of Next in Tech. Thanks to our audience for staying with us. And thanks to our production team, including Sophie Carr, Ramya Deshan, and Kira Smith on the marketing and events teams. I hope you'll join us for our next episode, where we're going to be talking about the industrial metaverse. Ian Hughes and Neil Barber will be back on to take a look at the latest that's happening there. I hope you'll join us then, because there is always something next in tech.